Dang, Ann, did
Okay,
you just
just
come
start.
from a wedding or something? You look great.
Hello, and welcome to Say Can You S.E.E., the talk show.
Go ahead.
The talk show of the Society for Economic Equality, being brought to you on G.R.T.V, public access cable television. In our literature, we say that we are a working class people. Yet we know, and we have been told, that we have no members of other races in our membership, and we have few TV shows dedicated to the discussion of racism. We also state in our introduction that we believe that it is time for working people of all races and incomes to proclaim a new declaration of independence from the oppressive and political system. But as we are a group of people, as C, who happen to have white skin, we share in the privileges of having white skin, no matter what class we are in. How can we discuss classism without talking about racism? We have been challenged to bring you this topic tonight, and many more times. We have a guest who we are glad to have as a spokesperson of the black race who can give his perspective to our topic. That's Steve Warren. We also have a couple of tools to help us to expose the problem of whiteness in our society and our economy. The first is some ideas from a magazine called Race Trader. I will read you now the following statement. It's their belief statement of Race Trader. The white race is a historically constructed social formation. It consists of all those who partake of the privileges of white skin in this society. Its most wretched members share a status higher in certain respects than that of the most exalted persons excluded from it, in return for which they give support to a system that degrades them. The key to solving the social problems of our age is to abolish the white race, which means no more and no less than abolishing the privilege of white skin. Until that task is accomplished, even partial reform will prove elusive because white influence permeates every issue, domestic and foreign, in U.S. society. The existence of white race depends on the willingness of those assigned to it to place their racial interests above class, gender, or any other, Race Trader aims to serve as an intellectual center for those seeking to abolish the white race. It will encourage dissent from the conformity that maintains it and popularize examples of defection from its ranks, analyze the forces that hold it together and those that promise to fear it, to tear it apart. Part of its task will be to promote debate among abolitionists. When possible, it will support practical measures guided by the principle treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity. We also have a few clips from a recent movie called Bulworth, produced, directed, and written and performed by Warren Beatty. In this film, he explores stereotypes, prejudice, institutional racism, counterculture, and many of the aspects that is our topic tonight. Our show is a call-in program. We ask that you call in after our discussion progresses. And now I'd like to introduce our panel. Our guest speaker is Steve Warren to my left here. And then to the far left, where he belongs, is Stephen Durst. And to our right is Dian Baum. And my name is Gerard Akkerhuis, and welcome to Say Can You S.E.E.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
I think one of the first things that needed to be cleared up is in the commentary. I'm not a spokesman for black people. In fact, I'm at times rarely a spokesman for myself. I thought it was a good idea that this organization, C, since they are concerned with issues involving equity, primarily economic equity, I don't see how we can discuss having economic equity in a society without discussing the issue of race. And I thought that this is probably one of the most relevant shows on, at least on G.R.T.V's programming, that would allow that kind of discussion to take place. And additionally, I think it's also a good idea for the members of the organization, as organizational members and as individuals, to state where they stand on this issue, and I'm here more as a listener than as a commentary because I don't believe that, for the most part, this is a discussion that needs to be had amongst non-whites. I think this is a subject that needs to be discussed critically and the analyses to be had and done and performed by quote-unquote white people. So go crazy.
Well, I'm really glad that you came. And I thought that was pretty funny when he said that you were the spokesman for all the black people in the world.
I was laughing. I didn't think it was funny, but I'm laughing.
But you know, I mean, I'm the spokesman for all the white people in the world, so
Not
you
to
can be
mention
the
Jewish people.
Oh darn! But well, Steve represents, and you guys represent all the Dutch people. I represent all the Jews and all the white people, but maybe they're not the same, and all the women in the world too.
No, I only represent all the German draft dodgers.
all the drinkers. And but anyway, yeah, none of us obviously represent anyone, and barely represent our own ideas very well. But you know, this is probably going to make the most enemies of any show we have tonight.
And this is probably why we hadn't discussed this issue on this show, because it is a very alienating issue. Right. And certainly if a large segment of your listening audience consists, I believe, of quote-unquote whites, and I believe that is the case. I haven't heard this discussion. I haven't heard very many of my friends talking about, you know, your show because they don't watch it. I mean, you look at it, the people don't see representations of themselves on the show, and they think, well, this is not for me. That was my impression when I first saw your show, which is why I brought up the idea of having this particular topic. But I'm really interested in talking about some of the material that we hopefully we've read and analyzed and are ready to give our feedback on, particularly the one article out of Race Trader called The Point is not to interpret whiteness, but to abolish it. One of the, I guess a bit of background on the editor of this piece, Race Trader, is a guy who is he considers himself a modern-day abolitionist. His name is Noel Ignatieff. And Ignatieff is an educator at one of the, I think, Eastern institutions. I'm not
Harvard.
sure. Where is it?
He's a professor of history at Harvard.
Great, thank you.
Formerly, for 20 years, a steel worker.
Okay. But I wanted to read one segment out of this article, and I'd like...
From Louisiana.
Okay.
Is he black?
How did he?
No,
how did
he's
he get,
Polish by descent.
He went from a steel worker for 20 years to a professor at Harvard? Is this like the usual tenure track?
No.
Affirmative action.
Anybody who reads his stuff will see that he deserves it intellectually.
Is he? He's really smart?
But one of the things that he states in the article, and this is a quote, "Whiteness is not a culture. There's Irish culture, Italian culture, and American culture. The latter, as Albert Murray pointed out, is a mixture of the Yankee, the Indian, and the Negro, with a pinch of ethnic salt. There is youth culture and drug culture and queer culture, but there is no such thing as white culture. Whiteness has nothing to do with culture and everything to do with social position. It is nothing but a reflection of privilege and exists for no other reason other than to defend itself. Without the privileges attached to it, the white race would not exist, and white skin would have no more social significance than big feet." Comments?
Or sex?
Well,
Reactions to that?
when I first read Noel Ignatieff's most recent book, How the Irish Became White, which he describes in minute detail how the Irish were oppressed in this society when they came here, and how by contributing to the police force and to the suppression of black people both before, during, and after the Civil War, they achieved their credentials of being white, of the privileges of being white. I was highly impressed and realized that this man had a revolutionary idea, which is that if white people simply refuse to accept the privileges of whiteness, if we refuse to accept those privileges that we get by having white skin, for instance, if somebody's telling you a nasty joke, and you say, well, I know you're just telling me this joke because you think I'm white, but as a matter of fact, I'm not white, then we begin to put a wedge in between the ruling class and the people that they consider their really useful slaves. And it's the people with white skin that they consider to be their really useful slaves because they will always have them on hand to put down the non-white people if they just hold to those privileges of so-called whiteness.
But you're asking people to give up privileges. How easy of a task do you think that's going to be, getting someone to give up something that
Well,
they
I
gained?
think we should
He's
ask
not
them to give up
asking us.
privileges, and
I mean, this is what Ignatius
I've-
is asking
Yeah,
people to do.
Ignatius is, right.
Ignatius is asking anybody who can understand what he's saying to give up the privilege of whiteness and achieve the right of a free citizen, an individual in a democracy with others who are equal instead of, I think, thinking about this show, I remembered that Bob Dylan song that about white people in the South that says they were taught from the start by the rule that the laws were with them to protect their white skin so they would never see that the state that they were in. So if we see the state that we're in, or as Warren Beatty says in Bulworth, working class white people have more in class with working class black people than either of them have with the ruling class, then we can, how would you say, achieve a true democracy, which is what the ruling class attempts to prevent by giving special privileges to poor white people. For instance, the police won't beat you up because you have a white skin, and then you see some maybe middle-class black person on TV being beaten up because they're black by the police, instead of cheering for the police and saying, yeah, this means that because my white skin, I have all these privileges. You should think about who is really screwing you in this situation. And is it the police who work for $25,000 a year, or is it the people who pay them $25,000 a year to suppress any attempt to have a really democratic society?
I don't think that there's any misunderstanding behind why the police enjoy the support amongst the white community that far exceeds anything that they've ever enjoyed in communities of color. And I'm speaking in a historical context now. The police have never had a love relationship with the black community, and that's been since they brought the first African over here. In fact, the people that were patrolling the boats were the police then. So when I think what Ignatius is trying to get particularly working class whites to realize is precisely what you said, is that you have more in common if you are not a wealthy land-owning white male in this society. You have more in common with some person of color that you may incidentally despise on
Because you've been taught to.
Well, regardless of the reason, I think the point is that whiteness is alienating. And proof of this lies in the fact that you've never had a major, in fact, I challenge anyone to find any history of a major labor movement that has happened in this country that has surpassed the issue of race, that has transcended the issue of race in the interest of workers' rights. You have numerous instances in which strikes that could have otherwise been effective have been really cut to nothing by people playing the race cards, everyone from politicians to labor union leaders themselves. So my question is, how do you get Billy Joe, who lives in a mobile home park, to realize that he's got more in common with Raheem, who may live in a housing project? And I'm taking two extremes of this example, but there's a point I'm trying to make here. How do you get Billy Joe, who probably is in a better position to overturn that social structure than Raheem is? How do you get him to understand that? I think that's the problem.
By pointing to the true oppressors. He has more to fear from his masters. The real slaves are the ones who don't even know that they're enslaved, the ones who are being used to keep the ruling class in place by oppressing people that they are told are inferior. If those people would see that their interests lie with their class instead of with their race, then we have a chance of overturning an oppressive system.
But I think you and I both know.
I don't know what will happen after we overturn the system, but
I think that we all know that the lower you go on the social hierarchy in this country, the more rabid racists you find.
exactly.
So we have a very a difficult situation here. The people who need to be reached most are the ones who are most victimized and so deeply entrenched in this thought that we can't get to them. So this is where organizations such as SEE, in my position, come in. What exactly, if there is a collective take on what is whiteness a problem? Is how we conceptualize it?
Okay, well, it's definitely a problem for you, and it's definitely I think what Ignatieff is doing here in Race Trader is that he's very ingeniously attempting a fix. You know, to me, it's contrived and it won't work. Sorry, but it's a really brilliant attempt at trying to fix a problem and talk about a problem in this situation. He even says that thank God John Brown got hung before he could go back to his white privileges. You know, I mean, maybe if we all get hung, you know, that'll solve the problem. It seems to me that...
Well, he thought John Brown's attempt forced the Carolinas into seceding from the Union, which caused a civil war, which brought about eventually a social change. Yeah.
A social change which brought about years of carpetbagging and, you know, the swelling of the northern, big city urban populations and on and on and on. I mean, you can't say that that was good either, you know. I mean, there was a lot of effects from, but it is one man that did a whole lot of stuff by what he did. And he did, you know, he did do something big as an individual. I have a question for you, Steve. Ignatieff, in these papers, it seems to me, is arguing that white is not a good thing to say, but he doesn't have any problem saying black. You know, he doesn't have any problem saying the black race, but he doesn't say, he says there is no white race. So,
well, he puts it in quotation marks.
Well, the thing is, he also talks about the arguments they had and the controversies when, I think it was in the 60s, maybe when Negro was dropped and black was substituted. They went to a term that really described a color, but then he's denying us the ability to use a color. He's making us say Irish. He's not making you say Senegalese, and you know, he doesn't make black people use their countries of extraction, but he's making us.
I think that's largely because
Irish
we for the most part don't know our countries of extraction. I know that my ancestors came from somewhere on the continent of Africa, but as far as identifying which of the 150 countries that was, I couldn't say. On the other hand, I don't think that it would be very difficult for any of you to trace your ancestral lineage back to a point where your first ancestors came here. But again, this is kind of getting us a bit off track. Again, we need to keep whiteness as the central focus here.
Right,
and
but
I
I'm
think
saying
that's
if you're going to say black, if black is an okay thing to say, why isn't white an okay thing to say?
I don't think he's trying to get rid of the word white. It's the concept.
He's trying to get rid of the word white.
He's trying to get rid of
white, that word a lot. He uses whiteness as a word.
He says it doesn't exist. So we shouldn't use it.
There's no such thing as white culture.
Right.
He doesn't say white race. He said white culture. He said there is Italian culture. There's Italian American culture. There is German American culture. But given the same social rules of definition, there is no such thing as white culture in the United States.
And if we talk about tracing our ancestry all the way back, every human being is descended from Africa. It's just a matter of...
Went through Sweden, right?
Of course. 100,000 years ago, genetically, you know, I read a lot of evolutionary biology and natural history magazine and books on evolutionary biology, and there's no dispute. Every race is part of the same species, and they all emanated from Africa, so we're all Africans. Some of us spent more time in the cold, snowy districts and lost melatonin, but that's no indication of any sort of special difference between us. As Bulworth says in that show, you know, if everybody has sex with everybody, then eventually the races will just all meld into one. And that's probably a historical inevitability. I mean, we're sitting here talking about whether our skins are white or black. Well, you know, in 100 years, probably the only people surviving will have skins that are fairly dark with the ozone going the way it is.
Well, I
And
don't
there's
know about
another
that with the prison building system going the way it is. That may also not be true either. I think, again, the central problem is how do you get whites to recognize that they are as much victimized by this social shroud of whiteness as racism affects people of color in this country. And that's my question. How do you get so-called white people to realize that? And additionally, how does this organization plan to aid in that effort? If
Well,
it does?
that's a good question, and we're
And I'm
discussing
still waiting
it.
for an answer.
Maybe our caller has an answer.
We have a
Maybe he
caller.
has a question. I
ahead,
think that's
Mark.
a great question.
Hello, Mark, are you there?
Hello.
Yes, I am.
Caller?
Yes, we are all Cafnan, C-A-F-N-A-N, Caucasian, African Americans, Native Americans, and Asian. We're all races. Who knew what grandfather did, or great-great-grandfather? We are the same. Race is not an issue. Don't answer the race question on the year 2000 census.
So you advocate that on the year 2000 census,
Yes.
we just say that we are all races at once?
Yes, we are all we are all Cafnan.
Okay.
Don't minorities want there to be, you know, more minorities on the census so they get more money and more help to overcome historic obstacles? I mean,
That doesn't seem to be the direction that things are going, though.
Or isn't demographics a tool of the institution to categorize people and separate
Tool of the oppressors,
people?
you mean?
Yeah. Who
that's
knows?
what our caller is
Right.
saying.
I got a question, Mark. How does my refusing to check a box on the 2000 census make me less acceptable by being stopped by the Kentwood police at night on my way home from work?
Good luck.
Hello, Mark.
Mark?
Okay, well, if Mark, you want to call back, you'll answer that. I understand what you're saying about how, in a holistic sense, maybe it would be best if we just did away with all of the racial classifications, but unfortunately, that's only part of the problem. The consequences of that classification system will still remain after those classifications are gone. And my question again, and I have yet to get an answer to this, what do we intend to do about that?
Well,
not we, but
Our group.
I have something.
you all. What do you intend to do about
I
that?
want to show something. We are still in an age where black CEOs make headlines in the paper. There's only 2% of...
The 2% that our
2%
CEOs make
are-
headlines.
Right, they do. They do.
And who was the guy who ran for city commission on the plank that there aren't enough black millionaires?
There's not enough.
City, who, Walter?
So
I
we
can't
Walter Manners?
always end up talking about class.
I think we have another caller. Gary?
Yeah,
Gary, are you there?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Great
How you
topic.
doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Great. You got a comment or question?
Yeah, I have a comment. I'm kind of wondering why the white panelists seem to be towing the Afrocentric party line, which is life all began
Because
in
we're
Africa.
abolitionists. We want to abolish whiteness. We think that whiteness
We
is
haven't
an
talked yet.
artificial
What's wrong with
category,
whiteness?
which
Hey.
is a tool of the ruling class
There's
to
nothing
oppress the
wrong with
working
races.
class.
There's nothing wrong with different races. Every race has a purpose. The white race, the black race, the...
Gary, what are the purposes of the different races?
I remember
You don't feel that the black race has certain qualities that other races don't have? And
We're talking purposes, not qualities. What are the purposes of the races? You said they all have different purposes. What are the purposes?
well, they have. Don't you feel they have different qualities?
Again, yes, they do have different qualities, but you said purposes. I'm interested in the purposes of the
Yeah,
races.
that's a good
Can you
point.
explain what you mean by that, please?
Well, what I mean is qualities. We all have different things to offer, and more to the point, what I also said is I really don't agree with the Afrocentric party line. Life all began in Africa, and
Life all
I
began,
believe it began
human life began in Africa. We all
Civilization
come
began
from
around
Africa.
the area of Mesopotamia,
That's
and I don't
fact.
think the first humans were black. I think they're probably brown, like more of a Mexican, Middle Eastern
Right,
shade.
right. They were anything
Humans
but
were
anything
first
but
black,
black.
right? And walked on their knuckles.
I think a more important
Well,
question
maybe you did, but
what the races do to
But
each other.
I'm an evolutionist.
you're not speaking for the white race. You're just speaking for
Right.
your
I'm not
liberal
speaking
self.
for any race, no.
Sorry
Right,
about that.
Gary,
I'm not even speaking for the
we're
working
all
class.
speaking
I'm
as
speaking for
individuals.
myself.
Okay, well,
And so are you, Gary.
True.
Is she still there? Gary,
Yeah.
you haven't heard any objection to the Afrocentric anything because Gerard and I haven't spoke yet. We're really...
Well, what I heard is just that
Well, I can just say plenty about the, and maybe this is the time to do it. I had a friend who was told flat out that he couldn't have a job because he was not a minority person. The minority, he was shown all the applications, the 200 applications, and none of them had the qualifications he did. None of them had the hundreds of publications that he had personally authored, but he was told that he could not have that job because it was reserved for a minority that had never published anything, did not have the qualifications he had. It was a clear consequence. It was a clear, he could have sued them. He was like gathering data.
So what does
to
all
sue
that
these
Yeah,
guys.
what does that mean? That means the
What does that all
ruling
mean?
class has
to
a
me,
mechanism for wedging us even further apart,
That's right.
so that we
That's
can
right.
fight for for places in the middle class
That's right.
instead of joining together
That's what it
as
means.
the oppressed to achieve a democratic society where there's a chance of true equality.
That's exactly what it means. But what it means is that you have to understand the aspirations of poor whites that are getting stomped down by the same oppressors, and being
You have to
told
understand
that
those
being to-
aspirations, and they have to understand who's actually oppressing them.
Right, that's
It's
right.
not the black guy they're competing for the job with. We're taught all to compete. When are we going to be taught to cooperate?
That's not something you can teach.
Thank you,
something you
Gary.
have to figure
We have
out.
another caller waiting. Mark again. Mark, are you there? Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Is
I
this
just
Mark?
wanted to say it's almost the year 2000 AD, and we're still hung up on classes. We're all the same.
No, we're
It's
not
just-
all the
it's
same. Some
just-
of us
it's
have
just
jobs.
a matter of money.
Some of us don't.
It is a
That's
matter
all
of
it is.
money.
Absolutely, it is an issue of money. This is what the
Don't
whole
talk
base.
about race and sex and
This is what the basis of-
habits and whatever else, ethnic background. We're all from the same ethnic background. We all came from Africa. We know this. The main thing is there are no classes.
They're not.
It's
There's no such thing as class.
yes, except the only thing that defines a class is money.
Okay, now we're talking. Now this is
Yeah,
exactly what
right.
we've been saying.
We
have
all
no,
agree with
we have
that.
no argument on that. So what is your point?
I don't remember.
Okay, well, call us back when you do. We have a roll in now.
you,
Well,
Mark.
I think
You're gonna introduce.
So we would like to show some of the Bulworth movie because I did talk about it already. And
it's a good movie.
yeah,
And Warren Beatty might be running for president.
Yeah.
this is his
Look, yes.
campaign. The beginning of his campaign is this movie. So okay, sound. Turn the sound
Here's
down.
the fire. As
Thank
James
you.
Baldwin said, the fire not the time.
Fire next time.
Oh, well,
Well, what do you think?
I think
We're
that
getting
really,
feedback in here, guys.
he exemplifies a white guy that's giving up his privileges, basically, right? So as far as
He
Steve
wants
goes.
to lose.
He wants to lose, but he has nothing to lose because somebody's going to kill him in about 20 minutes, right?
And I think it's also to keep in mind that this is Hollywood, okay?
It's never going to happen.
I've never seen a white politician do that.
Well, that's the whole point of the movie.
Okay,
You
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
like
But again-
liar, liar.
But again,
Yeah.
I think it's easier to get caught up in the revelry of what's going on in a celluloid fashion when you're in the screen watching this and you're being entertained and all. But this is a very real issue, and I think it's an issue that people who don't labor under this same system of oppression. I mean, your organization, SEEE, Society for Economic Equity, your economic equality. Again, I don't know how the hell you can talk about having economic equality without discussing the issue of race. In fact, I think any intelligent analysis of economic equity is incomplete without an analysis of race. As soon as he stops walking in front of the camera.
Well, we have discussed it before on over this cable station, and I think that I only speak for myself, but in my experience, there's nobody in this group who denies the fact that race has been used as a major wedge to separate the working class into competing groups to prevent their unifying to overthrow the ruling class and establish a economic democracy.
Absolutely. And again, how do we fix that? How is this organization going to help working class white people to realize that they're getting jerked just as much as a result of them supporting this social party line as everybody else?
Well, how can anybody ever help anybody realize something except talking to them as equals?
And we have discussed how we talk to our audience, whether we should talk to intellectual, academic, relatively well-off people, or to the common folk, the union folk, the people who don't watch cable TV.
I think we should be talking to the people about this issue by the ones who have the greatest propensity to make a change, and that is the working class, quote-unquote, white people. They're the ones who primarily need to understand this, because this is where the change is going to come from. It's going to happen. And yeah, we have a caller, Abby. Abby, are you there?
Hello.
Oh, hello. Hi. How are you?
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question. Actually, I'm interested in hearing you guys' opinion about this. The lady on the left made the comment that her friend was unable to get his job because he was not a minority. And my question is, don't you think that if minorities like myself had more rights, no one would have to worry about not getting a job because everything would be equal?
Asking you,
I don't know if I followed that. If minorities like you had more rights, no one would have to worry about getting a job.
I'm tending to
Not
agree
getting
with
a
it.
job. No one would have to worry about not
Not-
getting a job. Like you
Right.
made the comment that your friend was unable to get his job because he was not a minority. And-
Right. That actually happened to him. And he told me about that because he understands, and I understand where people are coming from when they form NAAWP, National Association for the Advancement of White People, which does exist. And
It's always existed. It's called America.
but the thing, I can't quite fathom your question. I think, we're really blessed in this group because it's been started by an old socialist, and we will always have a very class-conscious take on things. I mean, we know that race is used in order to divide us. And the lowest person on the bottom is going to feel like, well, at least I'm better than somebody. You're always going to be put down the person lower than you. You may not be pretty, and you may not be skinny, but you're prettier than that girl, and you're skinnier than that girl over there.
And you may not be smart.
Yeah, that's what I was about
You
to
may
say.
not be educated, and you may not be wealthy, but you're white. And that
Right.
means something.
But I think
But
what
it doesn't
Abby's
have to
saying,
just be white.
what
It can be
Abby's
anything.
saying, without these privileges of whiteness, for instance, or of class, that we could have a society where everybody could have meaningful work.
Yeah, because
And that's what I'm thinking
Abby's
too.
still here, so we can.
Yeah, hey, Abby,
Ask her if
let's
that's
hear
what
what
she's
you
saying.
say.
I mean, just coming from a minority background and dealing with many people who are having a hard time getting jobs because they are minorities, I'm glad to see that you guys are one of the few, probably, people out there who are willing to change and do something about this.
Well, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll
Check
see.
it out in a year or so.
I mean, but it's a start. I see it as a start.
Abby, we're not the employers. We don't
Yeah.
define employment.
Right.
We're not the ruling class. We don't define who gets to get into that social club.
We're not
Right,
really
But
the,
right.
we are definitely on your side in this, I think.
we're not the poor working class who drag people
Well.
under their cars either. So
Well, we're not the policemen.
Process. I guess they want to show another roll in.
More
yeah.
I
born,
wanna-
more born. I
I
don't.
want to give Abby a few more minutes.
Yeah, I
can
don't.
skip
We
the
can
roll.
always see Warren Beatty.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, you can get a blockbuster. Let's hear what Abby has to say.
is Abby still
Abby,
there?
you still with us? Okay, I
No,
don't think she's there
she's
anymore.
gone.
I
I think
understand
it's a good
exactly what
point.
she's saying. On the point of what you were saying about your friend, who felt that they were denied this job because they were not a minority. I wonder if this person would be able to tell you how many times they've been given something precisely because they are not a minority. Have they told you all the times in which they've gotten mortgage rates that were lower than what I could possibly get a mortgage rate at because they were not a minority? Have they told you all the times in which they've gotten their foot in the door in jobs in which they probably would not have considered anyone else who did not look like your friend because they were not a minority? This is the thing I think Nadia is saying
Yes,
about
he is.
the whole social
That's
phenomenon
exactly
of whiteness.
what he's saying.
You see, people tend to see the things or the systems that they are immediately affected by. How do you get people to move beyond their own personal sphere of oppression? When I first came to the station and I saw your show here, I was very excited because I had never seen anything, particularly in West Michigan, that looked even remotely close to what you all were trying to do with your show. But one of the things that discouraged me is that I watched you over a period of a couple of months and I said, okay, there's nothing on this show that would even give me a hint that these people have a clue of their own privileged status simply by them being here, having a show, a panel of mostly men, with a few women thrown in, a
Almost
few
always.
token women here and there,
No.
mostly men, yes.
Not token.
Well, not token,
they're
that's a
real.
bit harsh. But definitely it obscures the fact that you, on a daily basis, get things that you are not aware that you get simply by virtue of you being white. We have another caller, Vita. Vita, are
Nice
you there?
name, too. Hello.
Hello,
Oh,
Vita.
this isn't Frida. It's still me.
Oh,
Hello?
Abby's
Abby.
still here.
Who do we have?
Abby.
Abby's
Abby?
still here.
Oh, okay. We have another caller.
We like
Well,
Abby.
if
too.
any-
Yeah, we want Abby
We
to
love
finish.
Abby.
Do you have
Yeah, we
anything
love
else
you,
to
Abby.
say, Abby?
Do we have Vita?
Or Vita?
Do I go ahead and say
Hello? Vita. Okay, well, maybe she'll call back. At any rate, I think that...
Well, let me say that, Steve, we were waiting for you to bring this up, you know?
Why are you waiting for me? What if I had never come forth and given you this article? Then that
Well,
means you probably would not have discussed this issue?
Well, people are interested in what they're interested in. You know, Frank is interested in 19th century socialism. That's what he talks about. Mark's interested in conspiracy theories. That's what he talks about. You're interested in the race issue, so we're waiting for you to bring it to our attention.
Before you came here, actually, I did do a program called How the Irish Became White, based on one of this man's books, and we discussed his ideas about the abolition of whiteness and what you were just saying about the social club that is the history of the United States, that is basically all about the privilege of being white, you know?
I think it's false to have a show on racism with just 4 white guys.
And I think it's also more I think it's...
I don't think so. I think he's right. I think the white guys have to talk.
Actually, in all honesty, I didn't want to come on the show tonight. At the last minute, I decided not to come on. And I talked to Steve prior to the show, and I decided to go ahead and come on only because I had made a commitment to do that. But in retrospect, I think that this conversation, this discussion would be better served as a discussion had by quote-unquote white people about this issue of whiteness. You know, we don't need any more black people marching downtown at the Ku Klux Klan rally. What I want to see as an African American, I want to see how many white people are going to show up and protest that march. I'm waiting to see what you all are going to do.
You want me to have your ideas.
Okay.
I don't have your ideas.
We have a caller, Vita. Vita, we have a caller. Vita, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, how are you? You have a question or a comment?
Yes, I have a comment. I think the woman, Diane, I think, is exhibiting a complete blindness to a very important issue, that racism is not a separate issue from economics, that it is deeply imbricated and implicated in economics. When we look at the way this country was founded, the way it was built, the way the industries developed in this country, they developed with slave labor and cheap black labor. And that was one of the major ways that this country developed. And there is no way that this country could have developed without the exploitation of poor, immigrant, black workers. And they're still doing that. And as long as we don't factor that into our economic equation, we will always have economic analyses that don't fit reality. And I think that's one of the problems with Marxism. He never really factored race into his economic analyses, and so his theories don't fit reality.
Well, Vita, you're
Touché.
definitely correct. This country is still running and prospering on cheap immigrant labor, and the corporations have gone one better to take their plants to other countries so they don't have to have the immigrants here. Obviously, the difference is that it was also built on the exploitation of Africans who didn't come here by choice, and by the Native Americans who were already here, who were murdered and dispossessed. You're also right that Marx looked at the developed countries and thought that they could achieve a classless society without dealing with the issue of the exploitation of the third world.
He didn't factor
So you're right.
colonialism at all into his economic scheme.
Could you give us a little more volume on the caller, please? Engineer? Could you
I could
repeat
hear
that,
her
please?
just
We couldn't
fine.
hear you that well, that last comment of yours.
Oh, I said he didn't factor colonialism, the colonization of other countries, third world countries, into his economic schemes at all.
He did discuss globalization, but you're right, he didn't, when he talked about the socialist societies, he talked about them happening in developed countries like England and France and Germany. He wasn't even thinking of Russia.
Yeah, and those economies could not have existed and could not have prospered without their colonies, without the exports that they got from their colonies.
So what does all this have to do with whiteness, caller?
Well, I think she's good.
Well,
It's a complicated
I'm
point.
saying that, economics doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit reality unless you factor in non-white, their economic contribution.
I agree with you. I think that's what we're trying to talk about.
But this, your other panelist is saying that racism is a separate issue, that there should be a separate program for that. And
Are you?
if you don't understand that these things are deeply connected, then what your economics is just somewhere in fantasy land.
Well, let's let her respond.
I agree with you, Vita.
I think that the gang that runs the show, as somebody always says, will use anything they can to keep their position of power and privilege, and they will throw crumbs to poor white guys, saying, hey, you're not so bad off. You can beat up these black guys. That's a lot of fun.
Right. And
But
to do
they
that, we're
could-
going to make it easy. We're going to allow you to go to community college for 2 years.
Right.
And after
become a
completion,
secretary.
we're going to give you a gun and a badge after 2 years of completion of community college, and we're going to give you a license to use this gun with our support. It's the same strategy that they used during slavery times for the poor whites who could not afford to be slave owners themselves. They made them
Be the
slave
masters.
catchers.
Yeah, yeah, it
Or
reminds me. A
or
guy I went,
foreman. Or foreman.
Guy
But,
went-
Thank you, Vita.
but the thing
Yeah.
is, they could use anything. They could use, cookies. Anything. It
yeah,
doesn't
but,
have to be.
but
It's
race,
not.
but race is historically the favored instrument
A
of
woman
the
would
ruling
say
class.
sex.
Absolutely.
It's just.
What
it
would a
doesn't
black
matter.
woman say?
We're
With
gonna,
race and
we
sex.
need to please our producer here by showing 2 more minutes of Bulworth, and then we can finish up with some announcements and then concluding comments. Okay?
Okay.
How does that sound?
I didn't
Okay,
understand.
go, Mark.
Certainly.
My comment is relative to the comment that Ms. Baum made about her friend that experienced discrimination in terms of a job. I happen to be an African American who also has a third-generation relationship to Africans and Native Americans. And when you hear those kind of comments that are made, you sort of picture visually this impact across the country, that this is a strong trend. I mean, if you look at the other side of that coin in terms of the number and frequencies that African Americans experience in terms of job denial, it's fairly extensive. Now, I'm college educated, had the opportunity to travel this country widely on a business basis. And getting back to the producer's comment about whiteness, all you have to do is something real simple, and then I'll get to my question, and that is visit the businesses that are west of Lansing and notice the demographics, the representation of minorities, both in the management and the labor ranks. And you wouldn't think that you were in the state of Michigan. But my question is, when will there be a meaningful and a thoughtful dialogue about the economic cost and burden that everybody else tends to shoulder for white privilege? Now, it's easy to talk about welfare. It's very easy to talk about census and what that means to the minority community, but nobody...
Oh,
And where did Dave go?
I guess we lost Dave. Diane, you care to respond to what Dave was saying, since he
Well,
directed most of that at you?
He
your
was-
I'm
comment?
going to have to leave Grand Rapids
bad
after
girl.
this show, man.
Well, he was really onto something,
Oh, yeah, I think
what,
he's
what are the
absolutely right.
costs of white privilege?
Right,
You know,
he's absolutely. I think he's going in a better direction than what's
Ignatieff?
his name? Ignatieff, in a way, because I think the whole idea of we're the real abolitionists is not really the way to go, because I think what Ignatieff is doing is he's dividing, and I think where Dave was going when we lost him is really. Talking about trying to have a meaningful tally is much more uniting, and I think that's really a better place to start than saying, I'm John Brown.
So in other
kind of
words,
thing.
if we had the actual statistics,
Yeah.
we would have a better
Well,
basis for
maybe
discussion
nobody
than
has
if we
them.
just
More-
began with
more
Reagan's welfare mothers.
So we need more
lies.
government studies? Is that what you're
Do we need more government studies?
I think what we need is an honest look at what it means to be white in American society. Whether or not you have money, whether or not you own property, what social privileges are attached to white skin. And I think that discussion needs
It means
to start.
cops give me the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely. They give you the benefit of the doubt. You may get
You get
stopped.
beat up
You
too,
may
man.
get stopped, but you probably are less likely to receive a ticket because police officers will assume that you support them.
Exactly.
Unless you're riding around with a Avenge Rodney
Unless I
King
open my
bumper
big
sticker
mouth
on
and
your car.
say, you just think I'm white, but I'm black, and I'm gonna fucking be in your yard with Molotov cocktails.
But you
If I say that, then they'll beat me
All right.
up.
Well, Steve, if we really go home and not just analyze Race Trader, but come up with tally up what we think the real costs are in different areas. Maybe that's a good, will you come back on the show?
No, I won't, because I know?
Again,
I'm very interested.
He wants us to do it.
I want to see.
And he's going to sit back and put his feet up.
No, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to see
we're
what your level of commitment is. I'm assuming
I
that
have
this
no
is.
commitment.
I'm assuming that that SEE is a progressive organization. I'm assuming that. I'm going to.
Thank you.
And whose fault is that? Whose fault is that?
Yeah, right. Boy, I'm going to have to change Where's that L'Oreal? I got to change my look.
Shit. Next thing you'll be wanting to sing some blues.
Hey, did we ever do that show?
No, I haven't had time yet. Yeah, there's one. Jim's there. Ask him.